on what we know.
Yeah.
And what we know and the patterns that we have seen.
Yes.
And the methodology that has been applied. And there's nothing new in the methodology that will change the speed of it. Now, if that is the case, then what is the hope for Serbia? I mean, the general assumption has been since 2012 that the faster Serbia moves into the European Union, the further away it will go from Russia. Well, since it started negotiating, it's got closer to Russia and not so close to the European Union.
Which tells you a lot about the loss of transformative power that the negotiations have. They don't have this power anymore. It's a little bit hen and egg question, what was first. As far as Serbia is concerned, maybe three remarks. First, there's no point denying it because I'm on the record for having supported President Vucic in the beginning, in the first couple of years, because I honestly believed that he meant what he said. We met once before he was prime minister for an off-the-record conversation, and off-the-record should stay off-the-record, so I'm just broadly summarizing it. He was giving me all his ideas about why Serbia belongs to the European Union, saying, you might not believe me, but please believe me that I'm not dumb, and he's definitely not. He's highly intelligent, and I know where our money goes, I know where our trade goes, I know where our people goes. This is not Russia. And he also, spoke about his past and about what he did and said, and then in one of our off-the-record meetings, I decided to test it and say, okay, would you also say this, what you're telling me now over a glass of wine on the record in Frankfurt Allgemein in an interview? And he said yes, and he did say it, everything. And this interview was widely circulated in the political class in Germany, those interested in the Western Balkans, as a sign, listen, this guy means business. And I think he did mean business, because remember when he came to power, Nikolic was elected in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. And then Vucic came as deputy prime minister in charge of secret services, 2013. This was the year when Croatia joined. The process then still looked very realistic. And I do believe that he also meant it, for the simple reason that he understood this would be best for Serbia. Then came a time when he understood, and you cannot blame him for him. They are playing games with it. It's not true. So this is the first thing about Serbia. Serbia changed, but also the European Union's offer became less and less credible. That doesn't give you the permission to restructure your state into a semi-autocratic system, but it explains something. Secondly, if you are an opposition politician, unlike me, you have been in politics. I'm only describing it, so I'm probably missing part of it. But if you are an opposition politician going to elections in Serbia and you are on the market square in Niš or Vranje or Novi Sad and say, vote for me, I am pro-European, if you vote for me, I'm going to... What? You cannot lead your country into the European Union, because even in the last village between Pirot and Leskovac, they have understood this is not a serious offer anymore. So the opposition doesn't have a credible narrative as far as European Union enlargement is concerned. And the last aspect, this is also something I'd be very interested in your opinion. I have been and am skeptical, but I'm becoming more skeptical, and I'm articulating it more than in the beginning now, that the student protests in Serbia are going to change anything. And the main reason, substantially change anything. They have changed the atmosphere, yes, but let's see how long it stays. My problem from the very beginning was that I understand why the young people there in the universities on the streets say we don't want to have anything to do with political parties. Given the condition of the Serbian opposition, this is very understandable. But then I keep asking, and I haven't heard a convincing answer. Okay, what's your scenario then? Storming the Bastille, it's not going to happen because Vucic has genuine support of part of the population. If storming the Bastille is not your scenario, you need to engage in parties, because political parties, as long as we don't invent something new, are the traditional, let's say, instrument to convey power and political will.
It's an interesting movement. It has many components of it. I talked to Nataša Kandić, an old friend.
And she was here just.
She was a participant of the 68 demonstrations in Belgrade. And so I told her a part of it is reminiscent of 68, because these are people who are saying, no institutions, all institutions are corrupt. '68 in Belgrade was even more left than Marshal Tito at the time, so it was the extreme left. But it is reminiscent of what we did here at the beginning of the 90s. So there's creativity, inventiveness in a nonviolent way. It has a flavor of the Velvet Revolutions of Central Europe. So there's a movement that draws the rug from the legitimacy of power. It's a combination of all of these, but these are also kids who have grown up in the 21st century under very intense nationalistic propaganda. And so there's that dimension. There's also an intellectual infusion, if you will, from some of their professors who are saying not only delegitimizing the present structures, but delegitimizing the system as a whole. And so what we might be seeing, and I don't know how this will work out, President Vučić is counting on the summer and the summer holidays, and people just...
He's counting on Halkidiki being stronger than the opposition.
That's right. But I think what the movement, whatever the movement is, and however it's conceived, and it's a big advantage that they don't have leadership, clearly established leadership, because they would be arrested probably or corrupted or whatever. It's a big disadvantage because you cannot continue this kind of movement forever. So I think they are at a crossroads, and the moment of decision making is quite close. Do they ask for early elections? And if so, are they capable of politically organizing themselves?
Or supporting an existing party?
Or support
parties?
Which I don't think they will. But I think what they can do is serve as an embryo for a wider movement in which they become kingmakers. They become the ones who invite.
I want to see that, and then I can say I would change my mind.
I don't know. I'm speaking from... I have no knowledge except watching the news.
Well, I go to Belgrade quite often, and I maybe a little bit too often, considering that I don't go too often to the other countries I should be traveling to regularly. But I remain, for the time being, I reserve the right to not be enthusiastic, because I want to really see what happens in terms of realpolitik out of this. Sometimes people say, oh, we need a new Koštunica and a new Đinđić, a new DOS. I think Serbia has more than enough Koštunicas, but about Đinđić, I'm not so sure, because those people are born every 100 years, so we have like 40 years to wait or something. I became skeptical. There are two books I recently reread which nourished my skepticism. One is a very old one, which I read when I was 17 or 18, the English title of which is Masses and Power by Elias Canetti.
Okay.
A great book, I think. He is analyzing, it's not, Canetti was actually a writer, but this is more a theoretical, philosophical book. And he grew up in the wild Vienna and Frankfurt of the 20s. So he saw the Weimar Republic, he saw Austria in the 20s and 30s, the demonstrations. So he really has a theoretical analysis of what is a mass. And there is one sentence which I vaguely remembered, and then I found it. And I was happy to have found it because I used it in one of my analyses. A mass wants to grow. And if a mass wants to reach everything within its reach to grow bigger and bigger. That's urge of a mass. And the moment it stops growing, it falls apart. Yeah. And if you think of the demonstrations in Serbia on the 15th of March, I haven't been there. I was skeptical, were they really bigger than the demonstrations against Milosevic? But now everyone tells me, yes, there were. Even people who would not be interested in saying that admit, yes, there really were more than 300,000. Okay, that's an accomplishment, but what exactly does it mean? What's the next step? To have an even bigger demonstration, and then one that's even bigger than the big one? This is not an end in itself. Oh. And secondly, I read a book that I found really, I didn't agree with each and everything in it, but I found it really interesting. There's an American journalist by the name of Vincent Bevins. He used to be a correspondent for the LA Times in Brazil, and then later he, I think, went for the Washington Post to Southeast Asia. And he wrote a book by the title if we burn. I talked to an American friend of mine, Benjamin Moser, a writer, and he asked me, he's very interested in Serbia because he wrote this biography about Susan Sontag, so he started writing about Bosnia. I mean, being interested, now he's interested in the Balkans. You know, he has, the Balkan will not lose him. And he asked me, so what do you think about the demonstrations? And I shared with him the skepticism that I shared now here, and told him why I think I don't see much coming out of it. And then he told me, well, there's an entire book about your theory. So what Vincent Bevins did is he saw demonstrations, mass protests in Brazil. He saw them in other countries, and he saw most of them failing, not all of them. Chile was an example that he takes as a success. But he saw many mass movements failing, and then he wondered why. And then I suppose he got a scholarship or something. He invested 2 years in traveling back and forth, interviewing more than 200 activists and veterans of the protest movements, most of them which had failed in Egypt, Tunisia, Turkey, whatever, and asked them, okay, why? What happened? And what would you do different? And most of them said, and I think you have an example here in Kosovo with Vetvendosia, only being against something and being a movement is not enough. You must organize yourself. You must not be afraid of representation. Representation is not elitism. It is necessary. And all of the activists said, you know, this was our main mistake. We believed in grassroots organizations, which can be good for a time.
Yeah.
It can get you to one point, but it might not get you to the other point. And one decisive sentence is, his experience was, you know, there is no political vacuum. If you are demonstrating against a political structure, be ready to move in when the structure actually falls, because if you don't, someone else will. And this group might not share your values.
Yeah.